Hi everyone, welcome to our Module 4 notes. So today we're going to study the psychological science and description. So this means we're really going to look at psychology as a science and not just common sense. So is some of psychology just common sense? Well, that's obviously depends on what really is common sense. And is our common sense actual fact? Sometimes we think things that aren't actually true. So we might think that the oldest child is more reliable. I mean, I think that because I'm an oldest child. So I know we are. But see what I mean? So we see that as just common sense. But maybe the actual data would show that the middle child or the youngest child is actually the most reliable. So we can't just use our common sense. Do we believe things because we want to believe them? So kind of avoiding the information that doesn't prove our point, right? When someone proposes something, we dismiss those facts that go against what we want to believe. And we believe what other people want us to believe, right? Like think of marketing in general. You all have brand name gear, right? Like people wanted us to believe something about pretty much everything that we own, those purchases as an example. So we were influenced by what other people believe. Okay, so the first key term that you need to know for this module, and this is a big one, it comes up a lot. It comes up in future units, and you'll be like, cool, I already know this one. So it is hindsight bias, and unofficially it's the I knew it all along concept. So the idea that good ideas are like good inventions. Once created, we think, oh yeah, why didn't I think of that? It's about the reaction after someone knows the answer. For example, let's take football, right? You've heard of the Monday morning quarterback. So the quarterback does a play, or probably the coach tells them to do a play, and it was a risky play, and it turns out it worked, it was successful, it helped them win the game. The next morning, Monday morning, people come into work and they're talking about the game, and Joey's like, I knew that was going to work out. Like, I knew he was going to do that play. I knew it was going to work out. Not worried at all. That's because he already knows the results of the game. Now, that risky play could have easily gone the other way, and they could have lost the game. And then Joey comes in the next day. Oh, I can't believe he did that play. I knew he was going to try that, and I knew it wasn't going to work. So it's looking at information when you already have the answer and saying that you really already knew that. So our brains do this to us, but we don't actually already know it. We don't. All right, so overconfidence, or I'm pretty awesome. So we tend to be more confident than we are correct. So we think we're right more than we are. If you ask someone, for example, they did this study, and they asked if they would be able to unscramble these letters, how long would it take them? And the average answer was 10 seconds. So I would like you to pause it right now and see how long it takes you. So pause it. Time yourself. How long does it take you to unscramble these 3 words right there? Press pause or you're going to hear the answer. Okay, so in reality, it took them 3 minutes to unscramble these words. And the answers, let's see how well you did. The answers are entry, water, and barge. B-A-R-G-E, barge. So, how long did it take you, and were you overconfident? So, we need to use empiricism when we are looking at psychology. Psychology is a science. It is not just your common sense, and it is not just your intuition. And if we just followed those things, we'd be wrong. That's my point with hindsight bias and overconfidence. We cannot use those things. Another example is that human beings like to perceive order in random events and in random things, right? So in a piece of toast, they see Jesus's face, right? In a burnt piece of toast. And it makes TV, right? So we tend to look for things where there's no order to it, or the thing that we're seeing does not exist. So once we are shown these organized images, it's hard to unsee them. So when someone points them out to us, when they say, hey, look at this piece of toast, do you see Charlie Brown in it? Now I'm picturing Charlie Brown and I'm trying to find his face in there. So I'm going to have a better time finding it. But if you had just showed me that piece of toast and not given me that background, I probably would not find Charlie Brown. So you giving me that idea, it's like looking at clouds, right? That's another example. So someone says, look at that cloud, it looks like a dog. So now you're looking at the cloud, you know what a dog looks like, you're much more likely to see a dog. Okay, it does not mean that that's really what's there. I mean, maybe the cloud's not the best example. So if we flip a coin, for example, and if the coin was flipped 4 times and every time it came up heads, what would you guess next, right? And I know you guys know this math well enough to know that whatever you would guess, what are the chances that it's going to be heads next? It's 50-50, right? A coin has 2 sides, tails and heads. So every single coin flip, it is independent of any of the other. All right, so we also use the scientific method. I know you're familiar with this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we'll do some stuff in class too. So theories are an attempt to explain phenomenon that has been observed. A hypothesis is something that is a prediction, but the prediction has to be worded so that it is testable. We have to be able to test our hypotheses. So some ways that we do that in psychology is we might use a case study. We might look at it one individual and study it that way. We might take a survey of the entire school, or 2,000 people, college students throughout the country, or naturalistic observation. We might go to dining halls throughout high schools throughout the country and observe students in that natural environment and see how well they clean up after themselves. Correlational methods. So we might test our hypothesis by taking data, surveying people, and comparing 2 things. So women who smoke and premature babies in those women who smoke. They might be able to compare those 2 things and see, is there a correlation? Is there a relationship between smoking when you're pregnant and a premature baby? Or we can use experimental methods. Clearly, you cannot use experimental methods for everything, right? You can't take a bunch of pregnant women and say, okay, you in this group, you're going to smoke a pack of cigarettes a day, and you in this group, you're not. Let's see what happens. We can't do that. That's completely unethical. We'll talk about ethics in a little bit, but in an experimental method, it has to be something where we can manipulate a variable and look at effects. Experimental is the only one that we can really test by manipulating variables. So if we wanted to test if caffeine really gives you energy, right? We could test that in an experiment. So the 4 keywords, and these are words you should write down and know in order, of psychology. So what is psychology trying to do? It is trying to describe, that's writing down all those observable things that you see in whatever you're studying. trying to explain. So that's our theory. What's our theory about why students are not cleaning up after when they're in the dining hall, but they do clean up when they're at home, right? And then predict, make a hypothesis, test that hypothesis. And then finally, once we realize, oh, if students had more garbage bins closer to them, they would pick up after themselves or whatever. So the control is taking the information that you've learned from the experiment and using it to improve the situation. Maybe it's helping someone to quit smoking once you learn why, what's triggering them to pick up a cigarette. So here's my little trick mnemonic to remember: describe, explain, predict, control. So DEPC, right? So don't ever puke chunks. Pretty nasty, right? So the reason why I picked something gross and disturbing, don't ever puke chunks, is so that it sticks in your brain. Who paid for that study, right? Is it anecdotal information, or do we have a lot of evidence? So what are our takeaways? We can trust our gut with our feelings, right? You know, our feelings are our own, but not with information. We cannot trust it with things that we consider to be fact. We need to look at hindsight bias, overconfidence, and perceiving order in random events. All of those 3 key terms, which will come up a lot throughout this whole course, so make sure you really pause and process those. Those lead us to overestimate that intuition and just apply it to way more than it should